You're listening to certified financial planner Doug Goldstein, host of the Goldstein on Gelt Show, www.goldsteinongelt.com.
Okay, I'm very excited to have back on the Goldstein on Gelt Show CPA Yosefa Huber, who is based in Israel. She specializes in taxation and compliance issues of U.S. citizens who live outside the United States. Yosefa, a real pleasure to have you back.
Thanks for having me back.
After we spoke last time, a number of people, I think very naively said to me, they said, well, it was very nice you had that accountant on, but I live in Israel now. I made Aliyah. I don't really have much of a connection to the U.S. anymore. Do I really have to file a tax return? What do you say when people ask you that?
That's a great question. And it's a common misconception because it's an understandable misconception because most countries don't have this requirement that no matter where you live, how long you've lived out of the country, in the U.S., you still have to keep filing a tax return every single year. Whether if you're a U.S. citizen or a green card holder, you have to file every single year that you have income.
So let's see who would be exempt from that. Maybe someone who's lived in Israel for 10 years? 20 years? No.
Someone who has no income at all.
Okay, let's talk about that, actually. Let's differentiate because there are different types of income that people could have, and some of them they actually might not have to file a U.S. tax return. Can you give examples of when someone might have income but wouldn't have to actually file a tax return?
I can give examples of when people might think they don't need to file but would still need to file. People sometimes come to me and they say, oh, I just get paid in cash. I don't need to file, things like that. No. If you're making income, if you are doing something and somebody is paying you, that's income. It doesn't matter if they give you cash. It doesn't matter also where the money goes. That's a common misconception. It doesn't matter if they're paying into a U.S. bank account, an Israeli bank account. I say you could be working for, a company on Mars getting paid into a bank account in Timbuktu. You have to report every single bit of income to the U.S. once you meet a very minimum threshold.
Okay, so let's drive this point home a little more. How about people who say, well, I don't have to report because taxes are withheld at source because I do my investing through my Israeli bank account. I recently signed a W-9 with them, which they required me to do in order to have an account. And they're withholding tax, so why do I have to file in America?
Great question. So I want to break that into two different parts. So first of all, why do you have to file? The U.S. requires that you report all of your income. And the default, if you don't do anything, is that you're going to owe taxes on all of your income. So one of the reasons you're filing is actually to say, hey, U.S., this is how much money I made, and this is why I don't owe taxes. So there's two different issues. There's do you owe taxes, and do you have a requirement to tell the U.S. something? So most people that I work with don't owe taxes. I would say most of my clients actually are getting refunds, but they still are required, even if they don't want their refunds, that's not relevant. They're required to tell the U.S., hey, this is how much money I made, and these are all the reasons I don't owe money. And there are a couple ways that you can exempt your income or you get credit for taxes you paid to Israel, but you have to tell the U.S., this is what I made, and this is why I don't owe money. The second thing you mentioned is the W-9 is the form that you signed with the bank. And sometimes people come to me and they say, hey, I signed a W-9, so, I fulfilled my obligation of reporting some form and the IRS knows about me. I don't need to do anything else. And it doesn't work that way. The form that you sign with the bank gives the bank permission and the information they need to share your information with the IRS. You still have an obligation to report two things. One is your income, if it met this minimum threshold. And the other thing is that you are required to report your bank accounts on this form that we refer to as an FBAR, which is an acronym for Foreign Bank and Financial Account Report. So it's two separate reports that most U.S. citizens living outside the U.S. are required to report every single year. And that's green card holders as well, even if your green card expired.
Mm-hmm. We're speaking with Yosefa Huber, who is a U.S. CPA. She works with people in Israel, helps them with their U.S. taxes. She's been talking to us about one of the very important facts, which is American citizens in most cases have to file tax in the United States, no matter how long they live in Israel, no matter how they invest their money, no matter who pays them. You just have to file and tell the United States about it. I think one of the fears that a lot of people have is it just seems so overwhelming because it's normal in the U.S. If you live in the U.S., you file a tax return, you get your 1099 or you get your W-9 from work, you fill it into TurboTax or one of these things and you're done. It seems a little bit overwhelming here. Is it in fact difficult to file if you live in Israel?
Well, it's usually pretty difficult to file correctly if you are trying to use one of the IRS's many sources for free filing. Most of those sources, including TurboTax and H&R Block Online, most of those sources make it very difficult to correctly report everything that you're supposed to report. In addition, it's not necessarily logical, all of the things that you need to report. So I usually highly recommend, that all US citizens have a US CPA in Israel. And by having a CPA in Israel, I'm one of them, but there are many qualified US CPAs throughout Israel. They not only will know exactly what information to collect from you, which makes it much simpler. You don't have to guess what's reportable, but they'll also be able to keep up with all the laws, which probably isn't on your radar. Most people who don't talk to accountants don't know anything about the requirement to report foreign bank accounts, and the laws are constantly changing. So having a U.S. accountant here to help you file your tax returns is, in my opinion, a necessity.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree with that, because actually, in fact, just like many people, when I moved to Israel 24 years ago, I also used TurboTax, and I was trying to do it myself. And one day I said, wow, I'm a money professional. Like, I deal in investments, cross-border kind of guy, but this is just a whole new thing, and it's not obvious. And then, of course, you have the other issue, which is a lot of times the statements you get from your Israeli banks are in Hebrew. And, what do you do with that?
Yeah, I know a lot of people actually who for many, many years, they keep using their accountant in the US. They don't think there's another way, or they think they're saving money, or they're just loyal. And I really meet so many people that really want to be loyal to their old family accountant, or maybe their uncle's doing their taxes. And by the time I take over, their accountant in the US says, oh, thank God, you finally, I've been waiting for them to find someone in Israel. Because usually what happens is, if someone's using an accountant in the US, they're just saying to them, this is how much money I made. And they don't have all the details, and there's so many intricacies. So it's really recommended. On the other hand, something like your FBAR, you really can do your FBAR yourself. So if you want to save money, if you want to take control of your own reporting, go ahead, file your own FBAR. But the tax return it's complicated. You should really use a professional, in my opinion, of course.
So let's just wrap up on this one question, which is this common belief that there is no such thing as double taxation because of the tax treaty. And so people say, listen, I pay tax in Israel, so, I'm done.
Right.
Why are they wrong?
Generally speaking, there's not double taxation. For example, you pay mas haknasa, whatever money you pay for mas haknasa, you can potentially get a credit back to the U.S. You have to actually file a tax return to claim that credit. So that's number one. You also have something called a foreign earned income exclusion. So some people, they misunderstand the exclusion. They think if they're making under the exclusion amount, which is around $100,000 a year, that they don't have to file. And again, you actually need to file to claim the exclusion. So that's two things. The other thing is that the two main reasons where people might actually owe taxes to the U.S. are if they're self-employed, they're an atzma'i, as they say in Israel, or they might have rental property in Israel. And rental properties have a very low rate of tax in Israel, but in the U.S. they have regular tax rates. So those are the two most common ways I see people owe money. Most people who are employed, they're not owing money, but they have to file to claim the tax credit and claim the exclusion.
Wow.
The double taxation is coming from Social Security, which often must be paid for self-employed people. They have to pay Social Security in addition to Bituach Leumi.
All right. Wow, Yosefa, we really covered a lot today. Unfortunately, we are just about out of time. In the last few seconds, tell people, how can they follow you and follow your work?
I have a website. It's Huber, Huber, taxcpa.com. And if you do hubertaxcpa.com/blog, I try to frequently write about issues that are useful to U.S. citizens living in Israel.
Okay, we will put a link to that at the show notes of today's show at goldsteinongelt.com. Yosefa Huber, thanks again for coming back.
Thank you for having me.
You've been listening to the Goldstein on Gelt Show with money maven Doug Goldstein. Check out all of Doug's money ideas at goldsteinongelt.com. Doug specializes in helping people who live outside the United States handle their U.S. investment accounts. If you have a question that you would like answered on the air or off, contact Doug at his website or send him an email to doug@profile-financial.com.